Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please look us up on your favorite podcast app, subscribe, like, and share so that you never miss an episode. If you'd like to further support us, visit patreon.com/speakingout and check out the different rewards. You'll find exclusive rewards if you sign up as a patron of the podcast. Thank you for your support, and let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast. Thank you, as always, to our patrons who make the podcast possible. We could not do this without you guys. I know that sounds cliche, but we literally would not have a podcast had we not had patrons. If you guys were to leave, we would close up shop.
Ooh,
and
that's a terrible thought, Jimmy.
I know,
Don't even say it. Don't even voice that. Okay.
So, all that to say, we love and appreciate you guys. And if you want to become a patron of the podcast and check out some of the different rewards for the different tiers, please visit patreon.com/speakingout.
Thank you.
So today, this is a really important topic. There's a docu-series coming out, a 5-part docu-series, or I guess that already did come out just a couple weeks ago, on FX called Children of the Underground. And this is something I don't think we've ever addressed on this show.
No, we have not.
And it's this this idea that reality, I guess, not idea, this reality that, the spouses of pedophiles and domestic abusers, you name the type of abuse, they're victims who oftentimes don't get help within the legal system, right. And they run out of options. And we have talked about this, how a lot of times the abuser will file for full custody and get it. Mm-hmm. And so it puts the spouses and the children in a really, really, really bad spot. Our laws are not generally in favor of victims.
Let me interject here, and no, I will amen that times 1,000. A lot of times it's because the man, if he is the abuser, is financially stable and strong, and the woman is not, and the woman gets crushed. In the court system. He can hire a great attorney. He has the job, the finances, owns the home, the whole shebang, and a woman has not a leg to stand on. And she's left with this situation where she has to leave her children with visitation rights or with partial custodies, often full custody with the man, with the abuser. And it's a nightmare.
And I mean, I've heard judges talk about this. I've been in courtrooms where they say it's better for the kid to be in a bad home that's still their home, that they're familiar with,
many times,
than to be tossed around from foster home to foster home, or to be with the mother who doesn't have a job or doesn't have a job where she can provide. And that child winds up out in the streets homeless.
Exactly, right.
And it really does put the judges in between a rock and a hard place. And oftentimes, they'll side with an abuser. And this isn't convicted abusers, though sometimes I'm sure that does happen.
Right.
But these are people who are alleged to be abusers, and they've not yet gone through the court system. And so there is no criminal record. And I mean, this happens so incredibly often, it would make your head spin.
That makes it so difficult too, Jimmy, because it's hard enough when the person is convicted to prove, to go through the court system and prove abuse. But we're talking a lot in this docu-series, a lot of this abuse is happening to very young children, where the children can't be called up to be a witness or give testimony. So we have the mother's word against the father's word, and it becomes that battle. Often what happens with a woman, she becomes too emotional and is pinned and labeled as crazy.
Yeah.
She's just crazy.
Yeah. And I haven't seen the docuseries yet. I will. I just learned about it, actually through you. But I watched the trailer and I noticed that theme immediately.
Right.
And we see this all the time.
Right. Yep.
where
All the time.
survivors, spouses of abusers will say, they painted me as bipolar, as crazy, as being over dramatic, as being
Seeing something that I didn't really see.
yeah, because you're so over dramatic
Right.
that
Yep.
you blew this completely out of proportion, and you're alleging abuse. And my goodness, after all, Your Honor, isn't that a far cry from the person you see standing in front of you right now? I would never, the abuser will say things like that. I would never touch or harm one of my own children.
And go back to what we've kind of preached about over and over and over again. The abuser often has worked very hard to build up a front to others that he is this upstanding, wonderful citizen, this kind, compassionate person,
For sure.
this, well-established person in the community or within a church. So you put all that together and it, paints a pretty strong picture for the abuser.
That's the other thing. I mean, we don't really talk about this often enough, I don't think, but very often the abusers are highly successful businessmen because they are such good manipulators, and they are driven.
Right. Very driven.
They're not just driven to abuse, they're just driven in life. And they're go-getters. They're not afraid, obviously not afraid to take risks.
Right.
They're consistent, they're persistent, they have all the characteristics of a successful business person.
You got it.
And so oftentimes they are, and they're very wealthy, and they're very well liked, and they have a big social circle. While they intentionally keep their wives at home, well, you don't need to work, so why would you? You need to be there for the kids.
Right.
Why don't you just stay home and rest and take care of the home and take care of the kids? After all, you don't need to work anyway. And
I'm smiling because that was my role.
Absolutely.
In life, to be a homemaker. Now, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And that's where I was and wanted to be. But it also kept me out of context with other people, which wasn't a good thing at all. Because after a while, you do begin to think, maybe I am a little bit crazy. Maybe I am not seeing things as they are. Maybe I am over melodramatic. Maybe I am too emotional. If you get told that often enough, you begin to believe it yourself.
Sure.
It takes a great deal of courage to do what these women in this docu-series have done. A great deal of courage and sacrifice.
Yeah, and I don't know. I kind of have mixed feelings on this Underground Railroad kind of system because I see two sides to that coin. I see the one side where there are legitimately abused children and their parents who often also are abused, where the court is not in their corner, period.
Right.
And oftentimes it is life or death. They have to get away,
right.
and they have to hide because a lot of times the abusers are stalkers. They'll, they
go after them
again.
To
They're
the bitter
persistent.
End. Yeah,
they're
they are.
always persistent, and
right.
they will not stop. They harass their spouses. They harass the kids. They do not, will not, and cannot stop. And so, the one side of me is incredibly grateful that there are people out there to catch people like that and to help hide them.
Right.
And in this docu-series, the one lady, she's now retired from running this illegal Underground Railroad. And she said, I did this for years and I set it up so that they don't need me. This can continue without me. And now it's time for me to focus on me and my kids and my grandkids.
Right.
And so I'm grateful for avenues where people will step in and kind of be the hands and the feet of Jesus, so to speak, to help people. But the other side of that is that when people are in those situations, they're so incredibly vulnerable. They're financially vulnerable. They're emotionally, spiritually. From a trust standpoint, they don't know who to trust, when to trust. That whole world has been shattered. And so it leaves them very exposed for hawks who are out there
You are so right.
waiting to step in
Right.
and provide something that isn't really shelter.
Right. They are just open target for being manipulated to the very end. They really are. And it's hard for us to think there are such evil people out there, but there are. There are a lot of people who love to prey on the broken.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
any opportunity they get, even in this opportunity. And when I think of the underground, the way these women and children have been kept in hiding in order to escape often life or death, and the most brutal of abuse that they get pretty graphic with it, explaining what has gone on with some children. I think of what's slavery. We had the same type of thing, the underground for slavery. We had that hiding. I think of during the Holocaust, we had things like that. But things can go wrong with that. You don't always have the best people who are involved in that. There are traitors in
Absolutely.
every area,
Absolutely, yeah,
and we hate to
yeah,
think about
in the
that.
world of advocacy,
Yeah,
though, those people exist too that'll
yeah.
exploit people,
We hate
and we
to
know
think that
pimps and
way.
things like that. That there are a host of people browsing social media
Yeah.
constantly because they're recruiters
Looking for the broken who
for
need
trafficking,
somebody. Yes. Yep.
human sex trafficking, for
Absolutely.
um, the pornography industry in Hollywood, or wherever it is, not Hollywood, but the San Bernardino Valley. They have recruiters who that's their job, is to just browse social
Right.
media and look for vulnerable people. And they
Right.
said it's so easy to do. I've watched
Oh yeah.
documentaries where they talk about it, and they're like, it's so easy.
Yeah.
They're like, we can click online for 10 minutes and we can find people that quick
I
to
watched a
recruit.
Dr. Phil episode with a mother who went into prostitution because of having to escape an abusive husband. She had a child who needed an education, needed a home, and so she prostituted. Well, it turned into a nightmare. She ended up almost getting killed
Yeah,
because of the abuse she went through from the person that she thought was saving her. And sadly, that happens a lot too.
absolutely it does.
It's just this horrible, horrible circle of just abuse after abuse after abuse. And as I was telling you prior to this podcast, is it any wonder that there are children who don't trust anyone, who turn to drugs, who turn to a different lifestyle?
Oh,
Because,
to me it makes total sense, and
does,
you can
yeah.
sit back, and if you actually zoom out a little bit from the people that we interact with face to face every day,
Right.
if you zoom out a little bit, you can go back 5 minutes, 5 years, 5 decades, and you can say, oh,
You can see.
this makes perfect
Right. It
makes
makes
why
sense.
we're on this
Why-
trajectory,
Right.
and why we have this national crisis. And I want to add a third component to that, because there are the people who legitimately the laws don't protect them, and they have to run. They have to go underground.
They absolutely do.
That's a reality. Sadly,
It is.
in this country,
Yeah.
that's a reality. And we mentioned the other side of that is that there are people ready to exploit people who are vulnerable,
Right.
and take them into human sex trafficking and different things like that. A host of them. And if you don't believe me, I mean, look at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children website.
Right. Right.
The statistics are absolutely mind blowing. There are so many volumes of,
awful. I
missing
think
children.
it's so big that
Volumes
often
of
we
them.
don't want to think about it. It's that big that it's too big for us to think about what's happening to our
Yeah,
children.
and I mean, it's interesting, and I'll get to the third component here in a second, but we just had a conversation with some of our friends the other day. We were at lunch or breakfast somewhere, and somebody jokingly said, "Oh, your face would look wonderful on a milk carton." Well, then we started recalling the days when you had missing children on milk
yeah,
cartons,
right.
and somebody in our group said, "Whatever happened to putting faces of kids, missing kids, on milk cartons?" And another one of our friends piped right up, and he's like, "There are too many of them."
It's awful.
Back in the
Yeah.
80s, you didn't have
No.
hundreds and hundreds of thousands of missing kids on any
Right.
given day.
Right.
You had, hundreds, not hundreds of
Well, I
thousands.
remember going into Walmart and you'd see they had a bulletin board for missing children, and they may have
Yep.
10 posters with
You don't see
3
them
or 4
anymore.
children. No, no
Ever.
more. No. It's
Ever.
all gone.
In
Yeah.
fact, now we have the Amber Alert, and I don't know about your phone, but mine goes off
Yeah, mine
so
does,
often
yeah.
that sometimes
It
I don't even
does,
look
yeah,
at it.
it does. It's like, oh, I keep thinking maybe it's a storm alert or something. Yeah.
So, there's so much of this going on. There's so many people being exploited and further injured. And then the third component is the mental illness component.
Right.
We have people who legitimately are not well, who may or may not think that they're victims of abuse,
Right.
and they may or may not be. But there's a severe, really bad mental health crisis. And I'm telling you, even in our little small town,
It's big.
the volume of
big,
people who are
yeah.
living in constant paranoia, an altered reality where they believe in conspiracy theories.
Well,
And
fear does crazy things to a person. When you are afraid enough, when you are abused enough in that way, and your freedoms are taken away in your home or your whatever environment, and you're fearful for things like you and I know of children who have been fearful they haven't gotten food. They've been locked up in dog crates. This is in our
Right.
community.
Right.
This is in our community. Little children living in homes. I just recently went in one, no food in
Yep.
the home. None, zero, no food. Where do they get food from?
Yep.
How do these kids survive? So you have that going on. And after a while, you're right, the paranoia sets in. They trust no one. They have to fight for daily living.
And there's not help. There's not help
No,
for people
there's
living
not
with mental
enough.
health
There's not.
problems. We have a
There-
mental health crisis
right.
in this country,
We do.
and I'm telling you, hands down, right now, fact, there are not resources for people
No.
who are struggling with
People
mental
are
health.
burned out that have been dealing to help people with mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
They're totally burned out because their workload is so big. There's not
Their
enough.
their pay
yeah.
is awful.
Yeah.
Workload is way too much,
And I don't think
and
we
very
have
limited resources.
we need more trained, more skilled
Yeah.
people to deal with the depth of mental health issues that
Yeah.
are around every day. Every day.
But I think all of this kind of exasperates this problem. And, I think this is where we need to get a little bit louder. I think everybody still is focused on, they're focused on COVID. And, man, our politicians just, I don't have a good thing to say about any of them, honestly. Like, I'm so jaded by
Yeah.
politicians anymore. I have yet to meet an honest politician. I mean, and I've met a lot of politicians.
That's a
Not-
big statement.
It is.
I know. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's hard.
They're driven by money,
find-
lobbyists, always talking out both sides of the mouth, and it's disgusting.
I think issues like this, we need politicians who will bite into this and really tear it apart
And be serious about it.
and stick with it. Yes, tear it
We
apart.
have right
look
now.
what's killing. This is killing people.
I just saw an
really
article yesterday that our governor, he wants to send $2,000 checks out to Pennsylvanians who make $80,000 or less, and I'm like, and he's really fighting for this, and I'm like, you have $500 million supposedly. $500 million extra sitting in this budget. Why don't you spend it on mental health?
Mental health, please. Yes.
And I, by the way,
Address that.
we qualify for.
Oh,
we
yeah.
would qualify for that $2,000. I don't need it.
I know that. I know, Joe.
I'm not rich,
And-
but I don't
no,
need it.
but you're living.
It's a waste of
But
taxpayer
the
money.
mental health. My heart is crushed right now. This past week has been hard. I have talked to so many young people, and I'm talking young from ages 5 on up, who I see such hopelessness.
Yeah.
Their situations are bad, really, really bad. Parents need help. They need help. And it's like there's not enough hands.
Yeah.
and resources to help.
Yeah.
But something like this, when we know we have people going underground yet to escape abuse in our day and age, that's not acceptable.
No.
It's not acceptable.
No.
So I think you're right. We need to be louder. We need to contact our politicians and say, look, this is real here. And same about
Yeah.
those checks, the mental health. Put it in mental health. Put it somewhere where we're going to get
Yeah,
some
I mean that
good
is
out of it.
such a waste of money, and
It's a
I know
shame. It
people are going to
really
get
is.
upset and well, you're not for helping the poor. I'm all about helping the poor. We have food programs
I
that
was going to say there are so
are
many
tax funded,
programs
and I
right
think
now
they're
to help
fantastic.
our poor.
I think
yes.
welfare is a wonderful thing to get
We have
people
programs
help
that
who needs it.
food banks are all over the place now.
I am all for helping.
yeah.
I'm all for tax funded help
Right.
for the poor.
Me too.
But when you have $500 million and our mental health resources in the state
Well, what they've been doing
are
for
non-existent.
the past 15 years is taking money from mental
I
health.
know.
Look how many mental health hospitals and personnel have lost their jobs and closed.
I know.
In the
'Cause it's
past
the lack of
15
funding.
years. Right. Lack of funding.
And
So,
you have to write grants, because you were
I
part
do
of that
know.
system.
I was involved with that. Right.
It's an absolute
Yeah.
nightmare. You have
It
to
is.
crawl on your
It
hands and knees
truly
and
is
beg
Yeah.
for funding.
It is not a joke. Yeah.
So,
Right.
that money would be well spent addressing mental health because there is a crisis.
Right. Oh my.
And so,
yeah.
I think the big question for us is, what do we do about it?
Right.
What does this beg from us to actually be the hands and the feet and to help people? Because at the end of the day, when people land on my doorstep at the church or wherever, and they're like, hey, I need help, I have very, 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 very few resources that I can point them to legitimately.
Right.
And I know
No,
everybody
really.
in
I know.
our town. And I think
You do.
our county has great resources
We are
compared to
one
other
of the
counties
better,
in the state.
right.
And I struggle to give them the right resources. So, I think one of the things that we can all do, all of you listeners, we can start on a local level and start in the district attorney's office and say, what are you doing to help people? Like, first of all, what are the laws, local or otherwise?
Right.
What are the laws to help catch people who are victims of abusive spouses and parents, guardians? What's the system look like? Once somebody enters into the system, what does it look like? And don't make assumptions. Let them talk.
Yeah.
And let them talk about the cycle of abuse. And I've sat and listened to people. At the end of that, they're like, oh, we don't have a very good system in place.
I was going to say,
I'm like,
very few take
get them
the
to talk out
time.
loud.
Yes. Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
pretend that you're a kid. You enter into the system. Step one, what happens? And take it from start to finish. And at the end of that, you know what happens? A lot of times, these kids are sucked into a system for a very short time. They're regurgitated right back out and put right back into the home of their abuser.
I know a young boy right now struggling really bad. He's at a critical age where I don't think he'll make it through the school year. I think he'll leave school. Dad is just a mess. No mom in the picture. The boy continues to run away because he can't handle it. Mentally, he's broken. He is just broken. Too much. It's too much. He has 2 younger siblings. He can't take it.
Look at the volume of long-term runaways on National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website.
And
It's
awful.
a colossal number.
Awful. Now, to get this boy help, the dad says, let him run away one more time. And if I get him, I'm putting him on the doorsteps of the aid home. Okay, well, what's the aid home going to do? They're overcrowded. They don't have resources to help him. So where do you think he's going to get bounced back? Right, bounced back to the home situation.
Absolutely.
Which
100% a judge will put him right back in that home.
Very abusive, it's poverty, abuse, manipulation. It's the whole thing. Just really bad. How does this kid survive? And by the way, he's a nice kid. He really is. Who's searching for help, but I don't know the resources. I don't know I don't know. And if he leaves school, he won't have meals. He won't have the contact of a school counselor. Think about all
So the
that.
next logical step is crime.
And that's
I mean,
right.
period.
And you're right.
No matter how good of a kid it is,
We
your next logical step
a
is crime.
crisis in this United States of America.
In our jails and our prisons here in this town, we have two
they're-
state prisons and a county jail, all
overcrowded.
at maximum
They
capacity.
are. Yeah.
Always at maximum capacity.
And we can, if we trace back a lot of it, we did that in my office. Do you remember a few years ago?
You did
trace
stats.
back how many children were involved with drugs and alcohol addiction and sexual,
Deviance.
yes, because of abuse. The percentage was so high. And they had never done that before, never included that one question on the questionnaire before. A lot of it leads back to this abuse.
Absolutely, it does.
We just need to do better, people.
Yeah.
We need to do better. We need our laws to do better. We need our lawmakers to do better. We need to be better spokespersons
And
for
we
these
need our
children.
churches to do better.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell a story that I just heard.
Yeah.
This was just yesterday. This is a church where the pastor of this church is very, very into training for abuse, sexual abuse against minors. They have a security team. They all have their license to carry. They all carry
Okay.
guns. On and on and on and on. They have, child protection policy. I mean, you name it.
Okay.
And if you step back and you looked at it and you're like, this is kind of the model church. I mean, cameras,
Yeah.
like you name
Okay.
it. Very loud and unapologetic about, taking a stance against abuse and against abusers. So I get a phone call from one of the church members and he goes, hey, what do you think about this? We have somebody who moved here out of state who has a felony conviction of child sexual exploitation against a minor. And he said, I don't want the guy here because we have kids. And he said, pastor seems to be a little bit bothered by it, but not enough to tell the guy, hey, get out.
Wow.
And
So here we
he
go
said
again.
he's already, and listen to this. He's
I bet
already
I know
been,
where you're going.
He's
Yeah.
already did his time in jail. He's no longer on the registry. He was up front, to the best of our knowledge, about what he did. He brought it up. We didn't have to look. He brought up his past. And unless he really does something big, we can't stop him from coming here and worshiping Jesus. And so my friend goes on to say, this guy is repeatedly walking up to kids, grabbing them by the cheeks, tussling their hair, talking about how cute and adorable they are. I'm like, he's already doing it.
He's doing it. If that isn't testing the limits, I don't know what is, Jimmy.
You mean it's okay for a felony convicted
Not
child
okay.
sexual rapist to get down on his knees and tussle the hair of the kids
It's not
and grab
okay
their
for
cheeks?
you to do it. There are boundaries with
insanity.
children. Yes. What is wrong with people? What is
So
wrong with us?
we wonder why there's an abuse
Yeah,
crisis. That's
exactly.
it. We're not
awful.
protecting our kids.
No.
You can say it till you're blue in the face that, well, we're going to protect our kids, and Jesus would, he talked about tying a millstone around the neck of abusers, anybody who would harm these kids, and rah rah rah. But then I always say, what's your practice look like? If you're inviting people like that creep in, and you're watching him tussle the hair of little kids and grab their cheeks and talk about how pretty and how cute they are, I'm sorry.
Then you don't understand abuse, number one. Number two, you don't
I'd
have
go
a-
farther. You
Right.
don't care about abuse.
Well, there is just basically, yeah.
You understand it fully.
It's awful.
You just don't care.
It's just, I don't get it. But once again, it's kind of like the wife that goes to court with the husband who is the abuser, And the husband stands tall and says, yeah, I might have messed up once or twice, but
But I'm
look
a
at
changed
me.
man.
I'm changed. And look at her. She's a wreck.
Mm-hmm.
She's an emotional wreck, can't work a job, blah, blah, blah. In the church, don't we do that a lot? We really do. When there's a spiritual leader, we look at that person. We don't want to hear the stories of the broken and the stories of the, disheartened and those stories. We want to see the person that's up there being the upfront, I'm sorry I was a sinner, but look at me now, don't
Case
we?
in point,
Yeah,
fresh in the news, Matt Chandler down at
yeah.
Village Church. Matt
Okay.
Chandler was at the heart of national controversy for a couple years. The Village Church, they ended up being sued. In fact, Boz Trevigyan was one of the attorneys for the victim for covering up the abuse and allowing this youth pastor or whatever to continue going to church there. Kept it a secret from the church. Said that
No,
nothing
no.
happened. Blah 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 blah. This whole big thing. So Matt Chandler, I remember him standing up there and he was like, I could just tell he's lying through his teeth. I could tell by listening to him that he's lying through his teeth. Well, just this week, it was like 2 days ago, there's an article about Matt Chandler. He was temporarily removed from ministry at the Village Church for inappropriate conversations with a woman in the church, that he violated boundaries, and he said, I violated boundaries, but it was nothing sexual. It was just I was being stupid and violated boundaries. And so, of course, everybody in advocacy is saying, how can it not be sexual?
Right.
That you had this, you call it an inappropriate relationship. Matt Chandler, his words, there was inappropriate, coarse joking, but it's not sexual. And so he gets up and starts announcing to his church, and he starts off by saying, I did something really inappropriate and stupid for which, I've already repented, and I just want to say I love you. To which somebody shouts out, we love you!
Do you know why that works so much, though? Why does that work? Because we identify with that person, because every one of us has done stupid things.
Sure.
Now, every one of us has not
Exploited other people.
exploited and right.
Yeah.
And that's where we're not using our brains. That's where
Yeah.
the emotions take over, and it's like we sit there thinking, oh, that could be me up there. That could be me being caught for.
But for the grace of God, that could be me. Yeah, not really.
That could be me. I remember that one time when whatever it would be, and we cringe and yep, we love you, brother. We love you, brother, because that could be me. And we're also forgiving.
Yeah.
We're forgetting what abuse does to the victim of abuse. It is tragic. It is traumatic. The pain lasts a lifetime. A person, so much is touched by abuse. Trust, all these issues that we talked about. And I still say, I will always believe also our relationship with God is affected in a big way when we have been abused, especially by someone in the church.
Yeah.
How do you trust God after that? It takes years and years and hard work, and often people just go another direction. They give it up.
Yeah.
I know too many people who that's happened
Same here.
to. Yeah.
So, all that to say, there is this big group of people, and it's big, who are struggling in silence. The courts are definitely not for them. A lot of the laws are stacked up against victims, maybe not intentionally, but just the way the chips lie.
Right.
That's just the way it is. So we have a responsibility to speak on behalf of people and to get to know your local leaders. Go to the courthouse, find out what the laws are, and find out what the system is when a kid gets trapped, a kid and a spouse,
Right.
or a significant other or whatever. When they get looped into that cycle, what does that look like from start to finish? Find out, become educated. That's the first step. And that's step number one.
It is. Education is most vital when it comes to dealing with laws. If we want laws changed, that's most vital.
I think step two is then to say, okay, how can I help?
Exactly, and that's what I was hoping.
And
to
I'm
say.
telling you,
right?
Unless they're dirty and corrupt, like our former district attorney.
Yeah.
Unless they're really
Enough
dirty
said.
and corrupt, they'll actually welcome your help.
They will.
And they'll say, look, my hands are tied. Oftentimes, district attorneys that I'm friends with, that I've spoken to, they're like, I would love to throw the book at these people, but I can't.
Right.
My hands are tied because of the way the laws are written.
Right.
And so that's when you step in and you say, how can I help? Is there anything that I can do? And I'm telling you, they will appreciate it.
There is power in one. You are one
100%.
voice in our community. One voice. Your one voice now has echoed out into a whole community of people. I see it every day. The name Jimmy Hinton is known all around our community for speaking out on abuse.
Everybody knows me for
it
the
is
hair.
the hair, yeah. That and you're crazy. Tanning in ice.
Absolutely.
Do I want to call it that? Sitting in swim trunks in snow and ice, walking barefoot, jogging barefoot. But it's true. It all starts with one person.
Yeah.
One person with a passion to help. So don't think because you are one person, you don't matter. You do. It's time we need to pick up this mess, and carry the load to our legislators, see what we can do, and start taking action.
Yeah. And I mean, Jesus worked within a really broken system too.
Right.
He didn't seek out politicians and, try to get laws changed and all that stuff. And Roman law was nuts. It was absolute insanity.
It was rough, yeah.
And so he just worked within that broken system and basically showed up and presented himself and said,
and
how do I
Jesus
help?
didn't have a big mass of people.
No, he didn't.
He had a small group of what we would call by today dysfunctional people working with him with a passion to carry on his work.
Yeah.
So let that be our example.
We can help for sure.
Yes,
There's a lot we can do. It is definitely, I promise you, it is not the time to roll over and just give up and say, well, we're doomed.
Kids are depending on us.
It is not time to do that. Trust me. So anyway, step in, see what you can do, become informed, educated, and offer to help your local courthouse and just get to know people. Thank you guys again for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. A special thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Please help us get the word out by searching for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. Please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron and check out the rewards our patrons receive.